Excellent. Thank you so much, Vince and Jerry, for inviting me today. I'll do a quick introduction of myself. PJ Weiland. I work with ActionCOACH. I'm a business coach. So what does that mean? I work with small to medium-sized businesses, and really what I'm doing is helping them identify really where their goals are. What do they want to get achieved? What's the leadership direction? Are they aligned? Helping them hold accountable, looking at their sales, looking at how they market, looking at how they manage their pricing, what kind of systems they put in place, the areas that really help run a successful business. I don't discriminate. I work with every industry in that vein. And the reason being is because the business is really run in a certain way. And so that's what I bring to those folks. I'm not a consultant, but I really help coach the owners of the business and their teams to make sure that they're driving the business in the most effective way and they're getting the results they want. I believe that anyone who really wants to improve and wants to use coaching as a vehicle to do that should be able to afford it, and I always commit to a return on investment and a guarantee with my clients. So it's a part of who I am and what I do with my clients. It needs to be a good business decision. So that's enough about what I do. If you want more, I'll give you some more at the back end. Because of what I do, there's an element of behavior, right? We've all seen behavior in leadership that is desirable, or behavior that is undesirable, right? And I'm not talking about any of the people in the room. We're just talking about people you know, right? No one here. But what that means is today I'm going to talk about behavioral styles. There's a couple of different places to look at. There's personality styles, and then there's behavior styles. I'm going to talk about behavior. And the reason I distinguish between the two is because behavior, you have choices. And personality, there's a certain amount of nature that comes to it. But we can all walk into a room like this, and depending on where our mood is, where our mind is, who the people in the room are, we can behave very differently. And we can choose that. So there are ways in which we have natural tendencies to behave, and we behave under stress those ways. So we're going to talk about that, but you always have choices. So when you think about communication, and that's really what the crux of it is, right? That how do we communicate, how do we interact? How many of you have more than 2 children? More than 2 children. Raise your hand. This is a participative group, okay? So if you have a couple of children, they're probably a little different, right? They're probably night and day. There's a little bit of differences between them. If you've had siblings, how many of you have siblings? Anybody have siblings? Yeah? Are you different than your sibling? Yeah, some of you thought that was kind of funny, right? You go, yeah, oh, absolutely, please, don't mistake me, Mom, for that kid. But the reason I mention that is because there are behaviors, and yet when we have children that are different or we have siblings, we have to actually communicate with them differently to get a different response, right? And we don't always remember that in the workplace. We remember that when we go home sometimes, or when we deal with family gatherings, but in the workplace it's really important to understand the behavioral styles and the difference in the people. Because when you understand that, you can then begin to adapt how you communicate. And that's what we're going to end up at the back end. I'm going to share with you the DISC behavioral profiling system. How many of you are familiar with DISC? Awesome. Okay, so I got some great folks. And that's a great lead-in because the DISC is so powerful when you get into yourself and your own introspective and then the relationships you have with others, and using it in selling, using it in recruiting, using it in a lot of different areas. I had the pleasure of spending about a half a day with Tony Alessandra, who is one of the gurus of DISC in Germany in 2013, and he's just the amount of knowledge and the amount of information that he can provide on DISC and what they do. And then I spent a couple weeks ago, I spent a couple hours with him in Las Vegas, really learning the next level of DISC and what it is. So let's dive into it. There's a couple things that happen when we talk about communication. First, there is really the visual, verbal, and vocal when we talk about communication. And we talk about it, there's a lot, when you look at the 3 areas, there's what we say, what the words we choose, there's how we say it, and there's the visual side. What are the cues, what are the hand gestures, how do we present ourselves? So when we're talking about behavior, we're talking about all 3. Because we can say the same thing and have it mean something different. Fair? You have to participate. Yes?
Yes.
It will help your learning, I promise you. So verbal. So we can say something and say, you know, nice jacket, or nice jacket, right? We can say it very differently and have the same words. So when you really look at it, and you look at the communication styles and what we're working with, understand that all three are at play. And I think I was talking to Nancy about this, is that you can't do HR over the phone all the time. Because you miss some of these cues. We miss these cues in email, we miss them when we're on the phone calls. So really understanding how that plays out and the strengths that you have to bring to each of these. So a little bit of backdrop on that. So let's talk about this. Other than Frank, did anyone else bring their disc profile today? I know Frank did.
Frank up there.
He says, I got two of them. I think you actually said you got two of them, right?
Yeah.
Okay, did you bring one too?
Why no, my hair is young.
Yeah, okay. So I love this. So there's a couple things, and for those that haven't done DISC, I'm going to help you identify where you are in the DISC spectrum. And DISC is an acronym, and we'll talk about what that acronym means. But basically, what I'm going to show you is that there's this element of where you fall on a spectrum. And the first thing to look at is, are you guarded? Or are you open? And let's talk about what that means. And think about yourself, and think about where you fall, or a spouse. Are you guarded? Do you keep the information close to the vest? Do you share only when it's absolutely necessary for the actual communication? Are you short in your answers, short in how you provide information? Do you respond to emails with 2 or 3 words at a time? That's it. That's a very guarded. It's a very. I'm not going to reveal myself. I'm going to be kind of removed from that. Or do you err inside of open? And when you look at open, these are folks that you know everything about, right? You meet them, they burst into a group of folks who are talking. You will understand, you know the name of their dog, you know the name of their sister, you understand where they went to school, you understand lots and lots of information about them. They're willing to be very forthcoming with anything and everything, and there's really not much that's not on the table. So when you look at it, you look at where do you fall on this spectrum. So put yourself on that spectrum. And then the other spectrum is indirect and direct. So let's talk about what that means. So in the direct side, these are folks that are quick to speak, and it's really about pace. At what pace do you do something? What pace do you talk? What pace do you walk? What pace do you make decisions? Where do you fall on risk? When you're direct, you're a faster talker. You walk fast, you move fast, you make decisions fast, you overcome risk at a higher pace. All those things kind of drive at a much faster pace. And when you're indirect, it's about reflection, about processing, about I'm going to really understand this a little bit better. I'm going to take my time. I don't want to move too quickly in this area. I really want to be reflective. So that's really the indirect side. Make sense? Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
And I do that for a reason, because we learn kinesthetically. So if I ask you to raise your hands, that's helping you guys retain some of this. And we also learn audio. So when we answer and we respond, it helps us retain our learnings. So when you get into this element, these are the 4 areas. So have you all identified yourselves?
Yes.
Yes. Where you are? Okay. Very good. Who's yes. There we go. So let's start here. And this is really the dominant. And this is those that are guarded but direct. And just hold on, be patient. I know it's not your thing, but we're going to keep going. So just wait for anyone who's direct. Please be patient. It's hard for those who are in that space. This is really the influencer. This is my socializer. This is the people who are probably answering me when I ask a question. You're willing to be out there, right? I think you just raised your hand. Yeah, that's me. These are folks who are direct and open. He wants us to know, right? He wants us to know. But that's a great, it's out there. The next one here is steady. These are our relators. These are people who are amiable and friendly, and we'll get into that a little bit more. They're going to be less direct. They're going to be more reserved in their pace, but they're going to be open about information. So when you really think about it, it's a little bit different. And the last one here is compliance, or conscientiousness, or there's a couple other great words for this one. So that's really the folks who are guarded and indirect. And I suspect that these people are not in finance, maybe. There's a little bit of that, right? That may come out. And the conscientious folks are really the folks who are going to take a lot of this information in today, a lot of it, and be real reflective because they process internally, and they're guarded. So they may or may not even let anyone know what they're thinking, and what they're learning, and what they're doing. But they're a study, and they're studying it, and they're really focused on it. So some things about this. So let's dive into this. So who are my D's in the room? Any D's in the room at all? Interesting. Any of you married to a D? So I got a couple people married to a D, right? So I'm not surprised at all. The D's, you know, in this kind of a room with the financial side of things, I was afraid the room was going to tip a little bit, you know, with certain personality styles. But let me talk a little about the D. What they do best. And how many of you either work, do any of you work for a D or with a D?
Yeah.
Oh yes, that definitely is the case. Because D's are take charge kind of people. They move fast, they want to go forward. They probably irritate the heck out of CFOs, right? Because they want to go. And you're trying to catch their coattails, right? It's like, slow down, we've got to be more conscientious about it, we've got to be more driven about it. They are results driven, and they're terrible listeners. You recognize that a little bit with some of your Ds, some of the people in your world that are Ds? They're terrible listeners, and since there's no Ds in the room, I don't have to repeat that. But you know, sometimes it is a little bit of a challenge for those Ds to slow down. Winning is what they care about. That's what they are driven by. That's what they're focused on, is winning. Their desire is to win. And they don't play games for fun, typically. They play games to win. That's not a thing they do. Because they're weak listeners or poor listeners, it's mostly because they know everything. And they don't need to get in that. That's a belief they have because they can just drive that. So it's an interesting area. They hate repetitiveness. They hate things that are boring, that have to do it again. They want to move forward. That's that pace, right? That fastness. They don't want to do something again. They don't want to repeat it. And they're going to be pretty darn direct. Yeah, you guys recognize those folks in your world? They are blunt, and they don't like rules, which probably drives a few of you nuts. Rules don't apply. They go for the spirit, sometimes, of their interpretation of the rule, not necessarily the rule. You probably know, so you're in the back there just laughing, or someone you can think of, right? You're picturing this person. So these have strong personalities. They're very great leaders, and they take charge. Let's talk about influencers a little bit. So influencers, who are influencers in the room? Okay, great. And you notice influencers, they raise their hands nice and tall. I'm one of them. They're the socializers. They're outgoing. They want to be noticed. They want to be heard. Their favorite topic is typically, and they are enjoyable people. They're fun. They're party on. They're people you want to be involved in promoting your products, promoting your services, promoting things in your world. They're very good. And their desire is fun. That's really what their key desire. They're best at the promoting. They're best at really communicating. They can win arguments and not even have any idea what they're talking about. Because they just can talk. If you ever get into a debate with an eye, they'll just talk you into the table. And they're great. They're smooth talkers. They're fun to be around. The energy level in the room goes up dramatically. Our eyes don't typically like documentation too much, the details that kind of elude them. They're best supported by people who like that stuff, right? Have somebody else do it for me. Let me move on to the next thing. They love to move on to the next thing. They do not like to repeat things. They're typically the ones in college or school that did their term paper the night before, and they did it once. Recognize that, eyes? They just got it done and said, it's great. You know, it's going to be good. They didn't want to repeat it. They want to revisit it. They didn't want to, you know, spend a lot of time doing that. Their biggest problem or weakness is finishing, because they have such a high energy. They want to start things. They get excited. Big smile over here and our eye over here. That finishing, right? You need someone else to kind of pull it from behind. Great visionaries, great people to have, because they really have great ideas and to have on teams. So who are my S's in the room? Where are my S's? Raise your hand, S's. Okay, I got a few S's. So my S's are my relators, the people who are amiable, friendly. These people are the glue within your organization. They're loyal, they're steady, they will perform, they like process, they like that. They're indirect, they like to process, they like systems, they like that kind of element, they like the pace of that, the structure that adds. And then they're open, so they really enjoy sharing, more so on a one-on-one basis. These guys like an audience, these guys more one-on-one. Right? They're good relators, they're glue, they're incredibly loyal to an organization. They, because of the pace side of things, this pace of indirect, this slower pace, they will typically get into a situation where they are slower to change. So and they're really hard to irritate, but yet when they do get irritated, or when something's not going their way, they'll kind of take note and make a mental note that, yeah, this was it. And over time, that accumulates. So your S's will sometimes explode. You're like, where did that come from? Right? Didn't see that coming. And it was because it was an accumulation. So if you want to see a long marriage, look for S's. S's have an incredibly long marriage. I didn't say happy. They are long marriage because they're very tolerant people, right? They don't mind giving a little bit. You know, they don't mind putting up with this, right? They don't mind that element, but they just are incredibly friendly, amiable. They're great people to have around in the organization because they're going to be good listeners. They're excellent, excellent listeners. They may find sometimes that they're the shoulder to cry on, right? People come to them or people seek them out to help them understand. But they're going to be very, very slow to change. So when you have an S in an organization, you need something to move rapidly. Those are people that have to understand it beforehand, have to kind of process it, and then move forward. And then they'll be your biggest supporters because they're the glue. And they're going to be the people who people look to because they have longevity, because they have that element of it. They're team players. They're one of their biggest faults is they don't like to say no. They're non-confrontational. They just really don't want to disappoint anybody. So they kind of get in over their heads sometimes because they can't say no. But they're the glue to most organizations. So the rest of you are my C's. So who are you? Who are my C's in the room? My conscientious folks. I got a couple here, a couple there, a couple there. So the conscientious. This is the compliance, the conscientious. This is the indirect side of it. So that element of the pace is slow. They're guarded. So conscientious folks tend to be hard to read. You can be talking to them and talking to them and you're like, wow, I have no idea what they're thinking. I have no idea what they're processing. I don't know how if they agree or disagree. They are very, very quick to think. They're quick thinkers. They're arguably the most intellectual. So who are my C's again? All of a sudden the hands go up, right? A little bit more. Now, the C's are arguably the most intellectual. They're heavy thinkers. This is where folks like Michelangelo, Da Vinci, Einstein, those were all C's. Big thinkers. But they're slow to talk. So if you're in a meeting and you're in a room and you're trying to get to a consensus, they're going to be the folks who often don't weigh in right away. And you have to pull it out of them to weigh in. You have to pull it out of them to have put something on the table. And oftentimes they'll leave the meeting and the next day they'll come and say, yeah, I don't agree. And you kind of go, well, how did that happen? You know, the D's in the room going, well, we got agreement, right? Everyone's agreed, and then they just got everybody lined up. Guys like, let's go, right? Great great vision, let's go, let's move on. And that C's going, well, I thought about it. And I think there's some issues with this. I think there's some concerns with things. So they're gonna really slow you down and dig in your heels. And because they've given a lot of thought to it, and they're actually have some very good points and some very good things because they took the time to analyze the situation. They're the folks that are highly analytical. They like the spreadsheets, they like the details, they like that kind of stuff. So when you begin to look at them, they're going to be the ones you have to come back to and say, okay, we just made a decision that was pretty big. We have to give them time to process, right? They need that time because if they're not on board, they will bury you with facts. They have all the details. And these folks who don't really care that much about the details will get, you know, they can't combat those facts because this guy's given a lot of thought to it, he can bury with spreadsheets and details and facts and figures and really make that case very, very strongly. So the C's in the room, if you want something done right, you give it to a C. If you want it done on time, C's are not your best people. Partnering them with a D, because these guys want to get it done a little faster. They want to push it. These guys tend to be more procrastinators. That perfectionism, I got to get it right. You know, it's never good enough, right? It's got to be buttoned up 100%. Your D's will move and say, it looks good enough to me. You know, I kind of got it. Let's move on. Makes some sense? So you guys know some D's in your world? Yes, you work for some D's in that element. The I's will really, when you put together teams, all of these folks get into the mix here. Putting together teams that have, depending on what you're trying to accomplish or what kind of decisions you're trying to make, getting someone who's willing to make a decision, willing to take risk, partnered up with someone who's less willing to take risk, really important. If you're trying to promote a product, if you're trying to put something out there in the community, in the public, really looking for folks that are in that open space, right? They're the networkers, people who want to talk, want to do that element. So you've all identified yourself, you've identified your spouses, maybe a few kids, and maybe your boss in that element. What I want to talk a little bit next, and is how to use this in recruiting, how to use this in your teams, how to use this in selling, how to use this in the different avenues you have. Because we want to communicate in our own style. That's a very easy place for us to be, a very natural place, right? We want to take our style and we want to project it on others. And that's why I asked if you had siblings or kids, because you can't project that. So when you're looking at how you communicate, and I have a couple of sheets up here you guys can pick up afterwards on communicating with these folks. If you think about it, and you think about in recruiting, and let's take recruiting for a few minutes and talk about the styles in recruiting. When you're looking to hire a new position, and you're looking for folks in your organization, really looking at what do you need from that person? Where do they fall? What types of behaviors do you want to elicit? That will be helpful as you then begin, and I use it in recruiting all the time. All my, when I work with clients on recruiting, all the applicants take a DISC profile. And we match it up. First we do the profile for the position we're hiring, and we actually write the ad using the words that appeal to that. So when you think about it, if you write an ad and you're looking for an accountant, and you say things like outgoing, right? Creative, you know, you use words that, but if you say detail-oriented, conscientious, people relate to that with an ad, right? They go, oh, that's me. You know, people who connect with people who are friendly, people who enjoy teamwork. So when you write ads and you write job descriptions, you put them out there using words that appeal to that. And the trick is, you can't appeal to all four. I want an outgoing, detail-oriented, you know, results-driven. You know, you have to really pick a strength that you want to go after, because people relate to that, and they go, oh, that's me. I want to respond to that ad. I want to look at that. Yes, Vince.
Can a person fall in one quadrant, say
Yes.
personally, versus another quadrant Professional?
Great question. So personal versus professional. Absolutely, because some of us behave differently at work than we do at home, right? And so and you can behave differently as a board member of something than in your current employment, because it's about behavior. So and it is always, you always have choices. So when you walk into a situation, you go, the higher your marking in the disc profile, the more difficult it is to be a chameleon, right? Because you got we know some strong I's, right? And we know some strong D's. It's harder to shift, but absolutely. And I do have the opportunity, if you guys, I'll leave it up here. Anyone who hasn't done a disc and wants to, I have some information here on, and I can run your disc profile and do some things. So it is up here if you want to take it. There's a small fee to run those and interpret it. But you will get a marking in your disc profile for each one of these. It's because they're not mutually exclusive. You tend to have one that kind of leads you in the highest point, but there are others that can also be in that same realm. And some that come out under stress versus under adaptive behavior. So absolutely, absolutely. And it's interesting when you use it in recruiting. What we typically do is we throw out the adapted one because it's funny to see what they want you to think. They want you to think that you're a certain way. They think they're detail-oriented, think they're this. But we have ways in the disc profile to see the difference between a natural profile, who you naturally are, and who you are adapting your perception to be. So we almost always throw out folks that are in the adaptive because it's their belief on who they need to show up as. So that's how we use it in recruiting. It's a great tool in that process because it attracts different styles and you really begin to understand what you're getting and how that fits into the team dynamics. I worked with a physician, about a 20-person office, OBGYN physician. We had, it was really interesting, with 20 folks, we had 16 S's. 20 people, 16 S's. These guys did not like change. They did not like anything to change. They did not like, very good in the medical field. They're relators, they're in a personal relationship with their clients, very, very warm office. We had 16, we had 3 I's, including the head physician, who could talk anyone under the table, and used it to use their eye to push people around a little bit, because these people aren't going to push back. We had 1 C, that poor person. They didn't understand any of the rest of the people in the office. They understood, they wanted a lot of detail, a lot of information, a lot of, they didn't understand why everyone just didn't do it, right, in that element. So when you look at team dynamics, who do you add to that team? We were hiring a practice manager, and we wanted to bring in a D as a practice manager, because you really needed it. Yet, we knew the D would really run everybody else over. So it had to be a soft D, right, a softer D. But we needed someone like that because the office just was, kind of a more casual atmosphere and kind of people opting in or not, and this element. So when you look at your own team dynamics, do you have folks that play different roles? Because that's really, really critical in the recruiting and in building teams, even just project teams, right? To get decisions done or to get things moving forward. If these guys are out here, they're going to start things and they're going to push, but they're not always going to finish. These guys love to be in a project and love to get things done and take it through those paces. So that's a little bit of recruiting. Let's talk about when it comes to sales, because that's an interesting area. So when you think about sales, and you think about building relationships really within that element and selling and driving it, and you think about what kind of conversations your sales teams have with folks, and what kind of materials they have, and how they present information, and how they sell. When you look at your clients, your customer base, if you're selling into different profiles, let's say we're selling in someone who's a C. you've got to have everything buttoned up. You've got to have everything in place. You've got to have the details. You've got to have a lot of information. And if you've ever presented a contract or a sales contract to a C, they will ask you a question about page 14, paragraph 2. They will. They'll read the whole thing. So you've really got to know what you put in front of them. They will hold you to the letter of that. They will have absolute confidence that you're going to deliver every piece. When if they sign on it, because it's going to take them a little while to sign, it's going to take them a little while to kind of get overcome that and to believe you, because they're guarded and they move slowly. But once they commit to that, that's a very serious binding element of it. And they're going to look at every piece and they're going to question and they're going to drive that. So when you think about your sales and your client face, how are they making decisions and how are they signing things and what do they hold you to? That's a big part of who they are. If you're selling into an I, they get all lathered up and they get all excited and they're an easy sale. They might have buyer's remorse or they might have someone else who undoes it for them, right? Who says, whoa, slow down. You know, they have a little bit of shiny object, right? So if you can make it exciting and make it thrilling and make it a great partnership and we're going to have some fun in this and you can get them all excited, they're going to sign pretty darn quickly. Because remember, they don't want to repeat things. So they don't want to have this conversation again and again. They don't want to bring their boss in and say, okay, let's have this conversation again. So when you're selling to I's, if you really believe they have the authority to make the decision, selling into an I is fine, but if there's someone else who's going to undo it, or someone else who needs to be involved in it, getting them as early on in the process as possible, because the I will lose interest. And go, oh yeah, John needs to be involved. I got to work and get John in the room, and it'll be this thing that has to happen. You're like, you know, let's get you all in the room, let's get everyone at the same level. Because the I's, they just get excited. They won't read the contract. They may not even open the email, right? Like, where do I sign? How do I get to that? Let's do that. They will drive into that element. And they will go with the entire integrity of the relationship. They will go with the trust they've developed, and they will believe that you will do good by them. Because they like you, because they find that you generate the trust and the integrity. That's how I's will buy. The D's, they're kind of a hybrid because they want you to speak fast and get to that. And if you ever go to a sales presentation or something you're trying to pitch to a D, they don't want to hear about the history of your company and how you've gotten there and the story behind it. They don't have the tolerance for that. They're kind of like, you'll see them fidgeting with their pens and kind of, okay, let's go, you know, and they want to get to, okay, so how does this work? What does it cost? What can I expect? When do you get started? They want to drive that, right? They just want to get there. You'll know a D because typically it's very easy to lose control of the conversation with a D. They want to take the questions on. They're like, okay, great. And they'll turn the tables as quickly as they can to get control of that conversation. And they will drive it hard. And they will often make the decision pretty quickly because they have that fast-paced element of it. But they're going to make it because they believe there's a result or an outcome or evidence that exists. So having very clear element of deliverables, very clear element of what's going to expect. And that executive summary is all they're going to read. Right? They're not going to get into the details. They'll hand it off to someone else who can do that, their legal counsel or someone to mire through the details. But they're going to be pretty darn patient. And if you have to slow things down for whatever reason, it's going to frustrate them. And they may move on to the next person or the next person who shows up at their door. Yes, Jerry?
Don't you have to, I shouldn't say it that way. Aren't these the type of people that they have the 3 or 4 things, takeaways that they need, they want, and they demand, and that's it. And as long as you're on that point, if you get away or say, well, I got to talk to the boss or something, no, they're not happy.
Right, they want to, it's a great point, Jerry. They want to talk decision maker to decision maker. To your point, they want to know that they can make the deal at the table. if they're not dealing with someone, because they're take charge, right? So they want to be like, okay, so you can make this decision, and they can be somewhat overpowering. So if you can't match their power level, or their anticipated, or if they believe that you can't, it may damage the trust or their belief in it. Or they might just railroad you and you've just signed up for something that you really shouldn't have. or you've overcommitted, or there's something that you're like, oh, you know, I don't think this is a good idea. Because they're so demanding and very explicit. But they want bullets. They want real short, real clear what's going to happen. Meetings have to be condensed and need to follow the time constraints very, very, very strong in this. The I's, we talked about the steadies. These are guys who can't say no. If you've ever been in a situation where you're trying to convince someone who's an S, they will string you along for a very, very long time. And they will take you through the process, and they will introduce you to lots of people, and they will be a great coach for you in the process. But they need to get consensus. They won't make a decision without consensus. They don't want anyone to be unhappy with the decision. They can't tell you no. So if you're asking for, just tell me if we should continue, or you're trying to just get some clarity and figure out, well, how much more time do I invest in this, they're going to be really hard to read, because they just will not be straightforward with you. Because it's rejection, and they don't want to reject you. It's confrontation, and that's not a very pleasant place for them to be typically. And they probably like you. So they want to be liked in return, and they want to be helpful. And they don't realize they're stringing you on. They really are just trying to help you and say, yeah, it's going to take a little while. You trust me on this. So that's a little bit hard to see when you're in that process, because you may be talking to someone going, no, I think they're going to do this. It's just not this week, right? And then you go back and you're like, and it's not this week, and it's not this week. But really giving them opportunities to get on the hook or off the hook, and making it a pleasant experience. Would you like me to call you in 2 weeks or 6 months? They can kind of make that decision, and that's not a hard thing. Because, okay, that's kind of where they're at. So taking their temperature is really, really helpful in the sales side, because they're going to go. But I'll tell you, when you get into these guys, and you actually both of these guys, when you get them as clients and customers, particularly the S's, they will never leave you, because they're so loyal. It would be a violation of their relationship, a violation of that. It would be really, really hard for them to break that off, because they committed to the relationship even more so than to the service or the product or that element of it. So they're slow to make that commitment, but they're incredible clients and incredible customers. They don't like change, so any change is a difficult change. So they'll be your longevity side of things. And they're not terribly demanding. What will happen with them as customers sometimes, once they do cross that threshold, is at some point they may leave you, and you're like, I never knew you were unhappy. It's because they're not going to tell you. They're keeping score in this little, yeah, that wasn't delivered on time, okay, it's damaging the relationship, they're going to keep score. And then someday it's going to be, well, we've decided to use another company in that. And they may not even want to tell you when they send you an email, because that's not confidential, or have somebody else in the organization tell you. But they will leave, and it'll be kind of a shock. Have you guys ever had that before? Someone leaves and you're like, I didn't see that coming. Because we were very amiable, we had a really nice conversation, we were just talking years ago, and seeing everything was fine. But they are keeping score, and they are watching. So there will be over time, if you don't check in with you, and they're really easy to ignore. These folks in particular, right? Because they don't scream like the D's would scream. You know if a D is unhappy. They're on the phone with you, they're demanding something, they want to get it done. Clients that are S's, they go under the radar for a long time. And so when you look at your portfolio of who you serve as clients, go back and look at who's your S's. And take them out to lunch, do something for them. All of that, especially those who are married to an S or are an S, that goes a long way, right? Just doing something kind, doing something that meaningful, checking in with them, getting some information from them, that will ensure a much longer tenure with you. These folks, the element of keeping these relationships intact, because these are your biggest cheerleaders in a lot of cases, because they have longevity, they're willing to be open, so they're willing to talk about their relationship with you. These guys might love you, but won't talk much about it. You know, they're not going to be a big cheerleader for you. These guys will, and they'll write your testimonials for you. They'll be happy to do that. They'll be happy to do that. These guys will write your testimonials for you, yet they're kind of hard to believe. You'll be like, wow, we walk on water. You know, and they get, you know, they'll just, the testimonials will be great. And these you have to get early on because they're excited early on, and then they change focus, right? They move on. They just, absolutely. So when you think about how to relate to your clients, you've gone through the sales process. Relating to these guys are very different, and thinking about your clients in this element will help you with that relationship. The Ds, they don't want to hear from you unless you've got something going on, right? It's all good, right? Nothing's wrong. Nope. Yep. We got a new product. We got this. We got that. Just wanted to give you a quick 3-bullet email that tells you, right? And this is what's going on, and they want a few flash reports. Okay, so here's what this number is, that number is, that number is. That's all they want. And then they want you to pick up the phone when they call. And there's a problem and there's an issue. Right? These guys are the guys you're going to invite to your golf outing, right? Because they want to get to know you. They want to know your family. They want to know your handicap. They want to know all that stuff. So when you think about how you relate to that, customer is very different. These guys are really hard to relate to as customers. It can be. They want data and facts and information, and they want to make sure that it's compliant. So that compliance side comes in. So they're measuring everything. And if you can help them measure things, if you can help provide that information, if you can control what they're measuring by being the person bringing it to bear, that gives you a little bit of leverage in that relationship in doing that. So that definitely helps. I'm about 10 minutes out, so I want to open it up for questions. I have a couple of sheets up here for you guys to take with you. I have one selling into different personality types, one that's just communicating to each of the personality types, and then I have, if you have an interest in doing a disc and you haven't done one, I have that as well as some business cards and an invitation to, I hold a workshop on growing a great business as well, a complimentary one as well. So that's all here for you to take. I'm going to scoot out right around 9 o'clock or shortly thereafter. So. Questions? My eye, love it. My C's typically have questions, but they'll tell me tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yes?
Have you ever found people change over time? Like I would think, like early in my career there at the I, but there was a little more high D, and then I kind of got the high D kind of beat out of me, and I wanted to send me Dale Carnegie charm people and we lowered the D. So you want to know, do you maybe mellow out over time and some of the D goes away and maybe, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. They do soften a little bit, to your point, they soften, and if you work on them. And what typically happens is who you are is who you kind of come, and under stress they come back up pretty strongly, right? Whenever we're under stress, that kind of, behavior tends to surface. But what also happens is the better aware you are of these and the better you are self-aware, the harder it is to tell what you are, because you are adapting to a different style. I'm speaking slower, I'm speaking at a much more pace, on a slower pace, because I know that person perceives things in that way. So even though I'm not one of those, but I can slow it down and match and mirror. So that happens when you get really good at it. And that's what I teach a lot of my leaders, is that they think that they can communicate only in their style and it's an excuse, right? But this is who I am. So why do I have to change, right? It's not about change, it's about how do you communicate in a way that is best received by that person. So absolutely you see that. Yes?
Just a couple of comments I would make for people in outplacement. There's probably more you can get out of this, but a few things. One is, when you're in outplacement, you're all in a selling situation. So as you go into these interviews, you want to think about who is interviewing. What's the style of that person? How do you need to relate to them? That's the one thing that's critical, because if you're telling them something that is not their way of thinking, and it's a blind spot for them, it's not gonna go anywhere. But by the same token, the other lesson learned is you have to know what's gonna be the best fit for you. Organizations hire people because of their competency, their motivation, and their fit. And you have to know what's the right fit, what's gonna fit in that organization. If you're not really gonna fit in the organization because their style, culture, values, whatever, is not right, it's not gonna do you any good. So that's where
Great points.
your perception of who you are, what your style is, what your fit is gonna be really critical. Those two things I think are really vital to know.
It's also helpful, you kind of look at it from, how do you recruit? And do you, if you're really recruiting for one of these, having a process that supports them showing up. Because if you have a process that's about all talk, it's gonna be harder for some of these folks to show up. And show up well and show up accurately. So I use a recruiting process that includes some more written stuff and some more reflective stuff and some things like that. And it's always funny because the first half of the interview is very different than the second half. And the first half, we take a little break in the middle and we take the interviewing team, and it's always so funny because they all have favorites, right? I like this guy, right? It's a group interview, so I like this guy, it's great. We come back in, and then we actually see some of the stuff that's more reflective and is more, it's gonna highlight these kinds of folks a little bit better. And it automatic, and different things happen, like, oh, interesting, they're a good talker. You know, they're presenting themselves very well, I like them, but now I'm seeing how well they write, how well they communicate, how well they put a thought together. And so making sure your interview process accommodates these different personalities showing up. Because often, these are the people who show best up in an interview. Because they're gonna tell you what they've done, how good they are. These guys you're like.
I just want to say one other thing, and the other thing is, over years, talking to plenty of CFOs, there's not one style that fits the CFO. In fact, if you're a CFO that's very much an influencer, you're an outgoing kind of person, very direct, very open, that just might mean that maybe you need an organization that's going to be an asset to them. Maybe it's a very sales and marketing organization where they're going to be able to relate to you better because you're coming a little bit more from their perspective.
Yeah, it's a great point. Other questions? Yes?
Oh, yeah, very quick observation. I'm interested in your recruiting process too. You can tell some about the style of the company by what they ask for. So, for example, anybody interviewed with Uline, for example.
Oh, yes.
What do they have you do?
And they have you do a numbers test, yes.
They have you do a writing test.
And a numbers,
And you got
digits.
a writing
and-
test, and you got to put the writing in bullet points. So that's Liz Uline, head of there, very, very dominant
This is
style of
high.
personality she wants it, button down, no fluff. Yet there's other companies like, they might do something with the nonprofit, and they'll say, do this narrative, tell us your story, write about yourself.
Very, very.
Very different.
So really understanding how you fit, yes.
Just one other observation, I think of it more as you describe the types, it's being thank you very much, and I don't plan on going to read them. But I think that my right-hand person at work is high S. Why do we get along? Because I started, she finishes, essentially is how projects go. But that really actually helps our dynamic, because one does the other. And just thinking this through, I see more reasons why that works, based on your description.
Yeah, it is, the thing that we have to remember, if you're a DI combination, the Ds aren't gonna give you a lot of praise, and the Is need praise, in that element. So it's something, there's some gaps when you start to marry them, right? This I and S, that element of, they're not always gonna be as quick as you want them to be, right? They're gonna slow you down a little bit. So that sometimes that can be like, why are you taking so long? Let's just do it. Good enough.
Do you have any quick tips for a C or an S
Uh-huh.
when you're in an interview,
Yep.
and your interviewer is a D or an I,
Yeah,
and the way an interview is, you only have so much time,
yeah.
and they're saying stuff, and you're nodding. You're not agreeing, you're nodding because you're hearing what they're saying, but you don't want to necessarily say, I'm on board with what you're saying, because tomorrow you're going to come back and say, I'm not accepting an offer from them. But, do you have any tips for,
Sure.
in the moment, to show that, because it's not the natural tendency to say, I disagree.
Right. These guys are poor listeners. I mean, that is by definition, they're much poor listeners. And these guys are gonna overtalk you.
And wouldn't you just want to shut up in that case?
So in that case, giving them any cue, to your point, giving them any cue, they take it and run with it, right? You know, you know, in some, the S's and C's, sometimes I'll counsel them and coach them through the fact that you may not be ready to make a decision, but at least make it known that you're not ready to make a decision. You know, don't get sucked into agreement by default. So you have to be at least forthcoming enough to say, I've heard all the things you've said, I'd like to have the chance to respond to you. You know, it's not gonna be today, or whatever, you know, if I can have, you know, is it possible to come back to you tomorrow with some information? But you have to have that, because otherwise, absolutely, they just, even if, you know, nodding or not nodding or none, if you didn't outwardly disagree or come back at them, you've just signed up. You just bought the bill of goods. So that's that element of saying, I have to adjust my behavioral style to who I'm trying to communicate with.
If the interviewer is a strong D, you might be asking a lot of just good questions, allow them to answer, allow them to talk. They'll realize you're smart because you ask good questions.
Yeah.
By the same token, after the interview's over, and they did 95% of the talking, and say, boy, that was a great interview, you guys were great, you were really great. Because they had a chance to talk.
Because I talk about, right, myself, right? Don't need anything. Other questions? Yes, Jim?
Just a quick comment,
Yeah.
you know, on the dominant, and there's, I don't know if anybody's seen it, BDO has an advertisement on the TV, and the CEO was saying, just look at this, and they're in a warehouse facility. He said, now we're gonna be on 7 different continents, and so then the CFO is saying, yeah, but you know what that means, so many different time zones, so many different regulatory and so forth, and then it's kind of good, and he said, well, who's doing all this? Well, we have BDO, but I can see, the CEO's a dominant, and the CFO.
He's got to figure out all these details, right?
Yeah.
This is the, you know, they have ideas, right, and they're just do them, right, it's simple. Everything's simple here.
Well, also, this is what I want, I don't care what it takes, this is what I want.
Yeah. And that's an interesting thing in sales, right? Because they're willing to pay a little bit more, they're willing to do a little, you know, if they can get it done, right? They don't get hung up in that kind of stuff if they believe that the result or the outcome is what they want, because that's what they're focused on. So the subtleties of, oh, that's a la carte, we pay extra, we do that, okay, but we can get it done, right? It'll be done when we want it done? Yeah, okay. So they don't worry about those details, they let somebody else really focus on that. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.